count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
You have found Daniel Donato's Lost Highway.
That lost highway.
Howdy, y'all. What is going on? This is Daniel Donato. We are on episode 47 of the Lost Highway podcast, the podcast of all things cosmic country. One thing I want to talk to you guys about today is something I've been thinking about, which is gratitude. Strategic gratitude, right? Not just the kind of gratitude that, like, you see written on, like, the back, like on a bumper sticker of, like, a back of, like a Honda Odyssey. But, like, real gratitude. Like, not just, like, be grateful or anything like that, but to actually strategically apply gratitude to all of the bullshit that comes your way in life. Like many people in the U.S. right now, our power is out, right? Not here at the Cosmic Country Cottage because the power stays on here. But a lot of my friends don't have power, right? Their entire weeks got shifted upside down. Late last year, my grandfather passed away. And I think him and my grandmother were together for, I think, just under 127 years. And just like most people from the Northeast, when their partner passes, they move to Florida. And so my parents took my 10-year-old sister to go see my grandmother, to see how she was acclimating to her new life. And she's doing fine. She's hanging in there, which is very admirable. That's what us Donatos do. We're strong people. And my parents come home from Florida, and I'm asking my dad, well, how is it going? He's like, it's weird to see my mom get older. And as he's telling me that, I'm like, holy shit, you're getting older. And then I wrap the night. I go back home to my house. I brush my teeth. I'm looking in the mirror. Wouldn't you know it? I'm getting older too. And so it's like, whoa, you could be scared of this, but you could also just admit that death is perhaps the most successful entity that exists on this planet, because 100% out of 100% of everything that has a breath does eventually die. So I think gratitude is a strategic thing. There's this concept that's known as conditional happiness, which is the idea that you're going to be happy when you achieve something, and you shouldn't be happy in the present moment. But if you actually look at it, if you were to try to be happy in the present moment, it's going to make the eventual journey to whatever it is that will make you happy that much better, and that much more efficient, and that much more aware. And I think a way to be aware and to be in the present moment is to apply gratitude, because gratitude actually forces you to look at the thing that is right in front of you, as opposed to conditional happiness, which is kind of like a mirage in the desert. It allows you to see something that might not be there yet. And there is strategic soundness to that, right? To manifesting things and visualizing things, right? Not like a parking spot at Kohl's, but just like visualizing things that are rational. And it's like, I think gratitude is actually kind of like a trick in the simulation where you can force yourself to be present. How can I be happy about the thing that is happening right now? Well, I have to first be aware of what is happening right now to decide if I can be happy about it, or if I am stressed about it, right? Things like that. And so everyone's going to die, and I think it's all good. And I think if you can try to find gratitude in the moments when you are scared, when you're annoyed, when you're jealous, or even when things are going good, all the better. All of those things are less than the person who has the most amount of awareness in the present moment. Having awareness of the present moment has to be the most strong, abstract muscle a human can develop. And a great way to start lifting the weight to get to that muscle, I think, is practicing gratitude. So stay patient, stay persistent, stay positive. I'm doing the same thing with y'all, my friends. Stay grateful and stay cosmic. So I'm 12 years old when I first start guitar, and my dad brings some CDs into my room, and the only one that I really remember was American Beauty. The album art killed me. And he puts it into the CD player that I had in my room at the time, because CDs were the thing. And he skips to Friend of the Devil, and he goes, this is the one that'll take you places. And then he just said, close your eyes and listen to it all the way through, and don't open your eyes until it's done. And that was the first time I ever listened to a song with my eyes closed, trying to just get into the song. And ever since, that song has been the most transportative asset that I have in my life. I listen to it all the time. It's been my lighthouse for me. It's come on in very weird, ironic places at various points in time since over the decade that I've been listening to it. And fast forward a couple years, American Beauty and Working Man's Dead are going to be 50 years old, right? And so the Grateful Dead starts a podcast called the Grateful Deadcast, and they hire the MVP, Jesse Jarnow, to bring light and life and all kinds of obscure concepts to life that you would not have thought of before that are making the history of these songs. So they do an episode dedicated to each song on both albums respectively. And on the Friend of the Devil episode, 5 minutes in, Jesse goes, Friend of the Devil is the cosmic country moment for the Grateful Dead, something along those lines. And I'm running, it's like 7:30 in the morning, and I hear this on my Beats 3 headphones. I almost topple over in ironic astonishment. I couldn't believe it. I've had this cosmic relationship with this song for over 10 years. I listen to it almost every day. It's my alarm in the morning. And then an individual whose writing I already respect from his books like Heads and other articles that he's written and published online, he's saying that Friend of the Devil is the cosmic country moment. And I'm kind of in this phase right now where I'm on a cosmic country mission to share with what that is in the world, but also discovering what it is and discovering who I am, what my sound and my voice is. And so it was all very heavy for me, and I had to process it. And I had to do so by asking him to come onto the podcast and get his opinion on what cosmic country is, what his experience was like gathering all this information for the Grateful Dead cast, and his overall approach and philosophy to interpreting music in general. And all of it's very fascinating, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. Truly the one and only Mr. Jesse Jarnow. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for making this fit into your schedule. I assume you're a pretty busy person these days. You got a lot going on, and you've put out a lot to the world just within even the past year. What are you presently doing at the start of 2021, and how's that looking for you right now?
It's looking pretty overwhelmed.
Same here.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that's a unique answer. Well, tying up loose ends on a few things, but kind of gearing up to work on a book project that I've kind of been working on and off for the last year, and will be working on for the next 2 years, which is a history of music told through basically bootlegs and gray area recordings, kind of going back to the 19th century and going up through the present. But kind of the idea is that if you point at any moment in music history, of recorded music history, there's something vital happening that's not being released by record companies. Maybe they don't know about it, for various reasons. But
oh wow,
there's always really, just every era of music kind of has that gray area, and they're all interconnected. And it kind of, I think, if you look at them together, creates a bigger history. I'll have a lot more to say once I've finished writing the book.
Yeah, I mean, my God. So, I mean, absolutely, right? And the funniest thing that I just discovered recently about something that is similar to that concept is the connection between reggae music and country music, and how there was a lot of country singles that were very successful here in the States that were being cut down in Jamaica, that were being somewhat successful down there, but were never released formally here in the States.
Oh, fascinating. Something that I love about, I'm trying to remember exactly the sequence of things, but I know that there was the music being broadcast and being picked up on radio stations, like American singles being broadcast elsewhere. There's this great tradition of Jamaican pop singles in the early 60s of almost mistranslating pop tunes in American rock tunes and British rock tunes, like Beatles covers. There's this great version of For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield that's called Watch This Sound, which is a misinterpretation of the lyric. Yeah. I love those international accidental cross-pollinations.
What are some of the findings, like even in a macro sense of what you've already kind of unveiled, especially in regards to an area of music that I'm interested in, which is like early bluegrass and country music? How are you going to do any diving into like the workings of Alan Lomax?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, that is, kind of one of the ideas is that there's sort of these secret networks that kind of operate kind of in parallel to the musicians and into the record companies, which...
Wait, networks? How so? What are those?
networks.
Yeah, well,
there's like networks of people, the way people are kind of like connected with each other. Like Alan Lomax's group of friends would be like, so he was sort of connected to Pete Seeger, and he was connected to like, the Almanac Singers. And so when Alan Lomax would record a song and file it with the Library of Congress, sometimes they would put those songs out on like special Library of Congress LPs. Yeah. But just as often, I think he would sort of guide them to songs and say, oh, you should listen to this recording of this, these singers from the Bahamas doing this piece, and that, and sometimes things would get adapted into sort of the modern folk repertoire that way. So you have these kind of like secret connectors. And that plugs totally into the sort of the bluegrass and the country world way beyond Alan Lomax, in the sense that there's this whole huge world of radio broadcasts and transcription discs of like the Maddox brothers and Rose were like this, group that like, they basically made their following on the radio. It was, that was a huge important thing in the 40s and 50s and before is that's a way to get your music out into different regions. Yeah. But the bluegrass stuff, and I only know the surface of this at this point right now, because I'm kind of going chronologically through my research. Okay. So I'm really like deep in the opera era right now. But I do know, the bluegrass era, taping was a thing before the Grateful Dead allowed taping. Bill Monroe allowed taping.
Oh, come on, great.
And there was a whole bluegrass tape trading scene in the 50s and 60s that actually Jerry Garcia was part of before he was in the Dead. He was a hardcore acoustic musician. He played banjo, he played guitar. Those were kind of his two.
Robert Hunter played stand-up bass.
Yeah, he would probably be the first to say he wasn't the best upright bassist. He was maybe he became an amazing lyricist, but he was not the first call bassist in the Palo Alto folk scene. Though, yeah. Can't argue with chemistry for that matter.
Can't argue with chemistry. That's so real. Wow. That's funny.
But, there was this whole bluegrass scene in the Bay Area and down in the peninsula in Palo Alto where Jerry lived, but really kind of Berkeley was kind of the hub of it. And the way they would keep up to date with music was live tapes. That was how they were collecting tapes to learn licks. Jerry was collecting tapes to learn how to play banjo. It's not that I'm positive, I know that he was also appreciating the performances and the aesthetic and the whole picture, but specifically he was collecting bluegrass recordings as a technical matter. And in the summer of 1964, he and a buddy actually drove cross country from California to go to Bean Blossom, which was Bill Monroe's music park in Indiana. And they they saw Osborne Brothers shows en route and taped them. They're tapes that Jerry made where he's the four-fingered hand on the record button, and they actually were they were friends with people from this kind of like network of fans, and one of those guys was his name is Neil Rosenberg, and he is the preeminent scholar of bluegrass still. And they stopped at his house and basically hung out in his basement for a few days, connecting their Wallensack tape recorders to each other and copying off, the Osborne Brothers and Bill Monroe recordings. And then at places like Bean Blossom, you could actually get a patch, like a board feed, or you could clip, or I think the thing was you would have a microphone and you could clip it to the actual mic stand on stage and get a stage recording was a common thing. Like,
are you serious?
I haven't gone looking for them, but there are apparently pictures where pictures of like bluegrass acts on stage where you see like tons of mics clipped off of like the central mic stand. They're all standing in a circle around a central mic, and they would be cool with people literally making an onstage recording around that mic.
Oh, how heartwarming is that? How beautiful and how communal is that? So it's so consumer centric. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so, well, yeah, non-consumer in the sense that they were for free exchange, that they weren't for, it's fan centric,
Well, yeah.
and it's a
in the sense of a freemium, in the sense of
yeah, right.
Hear
Sure.
it and you take it and you experiment. You know how infamously Jerry said. Jerry has this incredible way, even just on the guitar too, of saying so much with so little, and after we're done with it, they can take it. As he's
right. Well, so the rest of that quote is him talking about, I used to be a bluegrass taper, and where that's where my attitude came from, is that I was, I was into that when the music that I was into. So and so that's what I mean by like the network of players and tapers, because so Jerry would be, that was one of the things that bonded the musicians together. It wasn't just playing music together, it was listening to music together and seeing music together. And these tapes are sort of symbolic of music as a broader network that isn't just somebody on stage and then people in the audience. There are all these other nuanced connections that create a music community, and some of those are people making recordings and trading tapes and carrying the music forward by learning it.
So it was essentially his YouTube.
Something like that. Yeah. No, he was a live music head. There's pictures of Garcia at the Berkeley Folk Festival. It's like him like literally sitting watching the Georgia Island Sea Singers, like in a room, it's not like a stage. It's like they're in like a conference room or something. They're performing, and he's just sitting there watching them in the front row. And it's, he's ahead. He was ahead, and he just loved that shit.
My God, man. And the thing too that's very crazy is you can go on YouTube, which I'm sure you've already done, and you find I don't know if it was from the Berkeley Festival that you just mentioned, but Doc Watson's playing, the Osborne Brothers are playing, and there's a couple tunes where Jerry's picking on some songs, like Sitting on Top of the World and some standards, where it just seems to be like kind of thrown together group of musicians who are just jamming.
Interesting. I'm not sure I've heard that one. I mean, there are early recordings of him from that era. And probably they weren't necessarily, the ones that I've heard weren't necessarily thrown together. They were bands that he would, put together and rehearse. And sort of what he said about it later was one of the reasons that he sort of fell out of the bluegrass scene, was that it required too many good players you'd have to like really be disciplined and have a lot of disciplined players rehearsing together in order to like get it over, and there just weren't enough players in his world to do that. But there's some great, there's some super wonderful recordings of him playing in that era. There is a one that I know is him doing Sitting on Top of the World. Maybe this is the one you're thinking of. It's from an album called, was released on an album called Folk Time. Mm-hmm. And it was a radio session from Stanford that he did with, I don't remember. He had a gazillion band names, but it's a dobro player. And then Garcia's just singing on it. He's not playing any instrument on the one that I'm thinking of, and it's just a stunning. It's like the earliest recording of just his voice as we think of Jerry's voice, like which doesn't really actually come out a lot in that era when he's singing in group harmonies, or you can tell it's him. But this one, it's this specific performance of Sitting on Top of the World. It's like, oh yeah, that's Jerry.
Right. And it's like that kind of like that rapid cognition processing of knowing like, oh, that's Jerry. I feel like that really started unveiling when the American Beauty and Working Man's Dead era really started coming into fruition. And obviously like tapes of those songs prior to when they were released. But like the earlier collections of like Self-Titled and Oxomoxoa, if I'm going to try to get somebody into the Dead, I wouldn't say like that's really Jerry's developed voice, or even the genesis of where that voice was going to be going, even on the guitar sense as well. What are your thoughts on that concept? I'm sure.
Yeah, vocally, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. I think Jerry kind of really, to me, the sweet era of Garcia's voice is basically begins, comes into focus during those albums, and to me lasts kind of until 77 or so. Actually lasts specifically until New Year's December 31st, 1977, after which something changed in his voice. And the band, the Grateful Dead changed. They became the band that was, they became it's hard to call them the modern version of the Grateful Dead, because the Grateful Dead haven't played a show since 1995, but they became, to my ear, they became the Dead as we think of them touring in stadiums and arenas, in probably, 1971. That's when that's when like all the pieces kind of aligned. That's when the songwriting kicked into gear. That's when Garcia kind of found that sweet spot with his voice. That's when just the band dynamic happened. Right. But I will say, when I'm trying to turn somebody onto the Dead, it depends on who that person is and what the context is. Right. Because for me, like Live Dead is just an amazing starting point as just this piece of improvisation, just for somebody who is coming at the music from a place of other improvised music.
Right, sure.
Which is, for me, a lot of arguments or conversations I've had over the years would be like going to, people who aren't into the Dead are just shooting the shit at like jazz shows or something like that, and trying to convince them that the Grateful Dead are something substantial and worth paying attention to if you like improvised music, or experimental music for that matter. So there's in another way, I would argue that those 5 years, 65 to 70, before they found that, is like kind of its own peak of Grateful Dead. It's there are certainly heads that I would play 1968 shows for, just to hear just that feral 2-drummer sound over the top with just Garcia at full shred, full
reverb, full neck pickup.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. And that's kind of its own aesthetic. That's the primal. Dick Lotfula, who's the Grateful Dead's tape archivist, called the early era the primal Dead, which kind of lasts, in his definition, kind of in terms of tapes, like late 67 into kind of 69ish 70. There's still kind of Alligator and Caution are kind of like the hallmarks of that era. So it all depends on who I'm trying to get into the Dead. It depends, that will completely change the first thing that I play them.
Sure.
Because there's a whole like scene in New York when I moved to New York in 2001, which is crazy.
Ooh. What month in 2001?
June 1st.
Oh my God. So you probably still had stuff in boxes when it all went down.
I basically, let's say yes.
Yeah.
But then, there was like this garage rock scene in New York when I moved here, where there was a real emphasis on energy and sort of in your face kind of music,
CBGB-ish, right?
Yeah, and almost like a cartoon of CBGB, like bands like the Mooney Suzuki were kind of big, which is sort of like their name is a reference to Can, but it's kind of like it's almost like an amped up level of what they imagine CBs to be in the 70s kind of thing.
Sure.
So that was very much like this like attitude in New York, and I knew, I was seeing. I wasn't really like a Mooney Suzuki yet, but I was certainly seeing rock shows in that era, and that was like the thing in that era. So like then getting, but listen to this like early Grateful Dead of like this, listen to Viola Blues from the first album, and it's just like, shreddy, feedbacky, noisy, like straight in your face rock, and it's like, and that is like a, the Dead are connected to so many musical worlds, and that's one of them.
The thing that I see so many, because I am in this weird nebula of music, and I grew up here in Nashville, and so it's like you see so much of a recurring theme of also what I talk about here a lot with other people is so much of an identity endeavor for a pursued identity and trying to find who you really are. And a lot of people fail in that endeavor because you don't realize how hard it is to actually be you. And the pursuit of being you is such a noble and valiant effort that as long as you're creating music and you're coming out with that kind of stride, then you're going to be on point. And you can see that manifest in the early Dead, right? Even aesthetically, like Jerry was wearing the rainbow pants, his hair was cut different. He had the gold top Les Paul, the famous San Francisco photo, and the entire street it's endless heads, right? It's funny to see how they found who they are. And I was always really interested in that. And so how this relates to me wanting to bring you on here was you said what I'm trying to do right now is trying to find out who I am as an artist and trying to be honest and do what I do. As Jerry said, don't be the best at what you do, be the only one that does what you do. And it's an amazing mantra to kind of repeat to yourself. And the first CD that my father ever played for me was, I was 12 years old. My dad kind of plays guitar, but not really. Like, he stopped since I've started, and it's what I do now. And in different areas, I play on people's records. I do my own shows, and et cetera. And you said on the episode for the Grateful Deadcast, on the Friend of the Devil episode, you said that Friend of the Devil was the Grateful Dead's first cosmic country moment, how that intro of their song was that. And that's what I go as. That's what this podcast is, the official Cosmic Country podcast. It's what I call my sound. It's what we market our shows as. And so what Cosmic Country is to me is kind of like me trying to pursue and figure out who I am as an artist. And I'm calling it that all the while this is happening and manifesting. And it was unbelievable for me how the first song I ever heard off American Beauty, my dad skipped a couple tracks and he goes, listen to this one. And he goes, Friend of the Devil. And that track forever changed my life. Second I heard it, I've listened to it every single day since then. I used to just play it on repeat for hours. Mm-hmm. I go back to it all the time. It's my ringtone in the morning. It's a very special song for me. It's like a monolith of a song. And to hear you call it the Cosmic Country moment, to me, that just seems so cosmic. It was like, what is this? I was literally jogging in my neighborhood and I stopped running. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because that song just means the world to me. And to hear you call it that is unbelievable. So I kind of wanted to get your idea on a couple things, right? And I'll ask you those questions as we go on. And again, thank you for your time here. But before we go on to some of those, I want to kind of get your take on what you think Cosmic Country is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess probably when I said that on the podcast, I was a little bit riffing on Graham Parsons' phrase, cosmic American music, which is sort of what he was describing the fine Burrito Brothers as in their early days. But I have devoted quite a bit of time thinking about what, cosmic American music is, or just the ways. I'm just fascinated by the ways that there's this whole, lineage of folk music that goes back infinitely, basically.
Right.
And the concerns of that music, when you think about folk music, we think of sort of earthly things, I suppose. But then there are you get these themes. It's sort of the call of the weird, I guess. And I'm sort of borrowing that expression a little bit from Eric Davis, who's an amazing writer.
I don't know. Eric. Okay.
And it's this idea that there's something beyond, that this idea that this traditional music can be used to express something that is weirder and more far out than would be commonly expressed within the scope of the culture in which the music is being made.
Right.
And I get sort of, I remember, I've written a book about psychedelics, so I guess it shouldn't be that surprising or crazy to admit that I've actually taken the psychedelics in my life. But I remember, one of the times that one of my early times I dosed, was probably in college, thinking about what did they, before people knew about acid and something was trippy, what word did they use? Because it's not like suddenly acid appears and then there are things that are trippy. Wow. There was always stuff that was trippy. Yeah. And so that actually, there's whole lineages of that. And you find it you do find it in country music and traditional music. Probably the words that they use were strange or queer or ephemeral or something like that. You find, obviously a long history of like weird science fiction and strange tales.
Sure.
And, like H.P. Lovecraft and things like that.
Sure.
But you also find these weird things in traditional music, just like the barest little hints. Like I do hear, just like the phrase "lost highway" to me is kind of cosmic. It's just it's sort of implying this supernatural other world, this other place. And I guess in terms of traditional music, a lot of that does come out of like almost like the gospel tradition or the I guess the tradition of Christian music. Some weird stuff and beautiful images, but weird images.
I saw the light. That was
or gathering flowers for the master's bouquet is such a beautiful image, and it's so haunting, and it's so cosmic. Really,
it's really cosmic.
Like you're talking about a cosmic bouquet, like you're talking about the supernatural flowers, and it's like, wow. So it's there, and it's maybe there. Somebody's already done this. Maybe there's, and there's like outsider country music as well, where you get kind of like these like weird recordings of these loners that kind of have their own visions of things that were, never mainstream. Light in the Attic. I'm thinking specifically of a Light in the Attic thing that they put out a couple of years ago. I don't remember the name of the record, but Lonely Sidewalks is the song that I'm thinking of by Donald Adkins. It's kind of this like,
yep.
I don't even know if it came out. It might have been like a test pressing that Light in the Attic found. But anyway, just that there's this whole lineage of basically weirdos, I guess is what I'm saying.
Let's get there.
Or heads or something. And I guess this was kind of like an eye-opening moment for me in terms of discovering music from around the world, and not just American folk music, but just that like, oh,
right.
There are weirdos in Africa and weirdos in New Zealand and weirdos everywhere, and making, just like thinking about like, who would I be hanging out with if I happen, people of my personality type, I assume probably your personality type, like, who are the heads kind of like right. doing the weird stuff. And that's everywhere. You just have to look for it. And it's there in old folk music. It's there in music from basically any country in any continent. You can find that. So to me, cosmic country is kind of like the collision point of like traditional folk music and people who kind of are like have an eye or a third eye, I guess, for that kind of thing.
Wow, my God, that is such a great way to put it, my friend. I mean, so wonderfully put. That's great. I like how you said in your book how who was it? Humphrey Osmond from ancient. You took the word psychedelic, and he took it and he said that the Greek interpretation is mind manifesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually I don't think I'll probably be able to pull it up, just at this exact second. But there's some great correspondence with Humphrey Osmond where they're talking about different roots of what became psychedelic, where they're kind of like. I don't remember what the other ones were, but like other things, it was like spirit manifesting or consciousness manifesting, or it was like other Greek roots. So there's all these basically first drafts of what became psychedelic, of like playing with kind of Greek suffixes and antonyms. I don't know what the proper linguistic terms are. But yeah, no, it's a modern word. It's not, it's a relatively recent concept.
It's weird because we use all these mouth sounds that we call words to dictate what we assume are very concrete and understood ideas, but really like they're not. And we can even hear that in how different languages will interpret our songs, coming from the English language. As you mentioned earlier with someone from Jamaica getting the Buffalo Springfield song, quote unquote, incorrect and coming out with their own piece of art, which is just as valid. Right, and it's weird. It's like you kind of get the concept here of like, which I feel like the Dead show me all of the time, is that everything is open to interpretation. Everything can kind of be turned on its axis and be turned around. That's something I very much so like from the book Heads and from what I've read about it so far. And so, I mean, that is an astounding read for everyone who already hasn't read it. Very cool to find out that the term psychedelic is not an old word. It's definitely a modern thing, but it is an old feeling. It's kind of out there. Like, what's going on? I feel like Cosmic does summarize that up in a big way. And there's something that is so incredibly cosmic about Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, and how it, even just the fact that how close those two projects were written together, and how fast they were made, and how their approach to the projects were the antithesis of their initial approaches to their prior 5 releases. And it's like, what do you think about that whole phenomenology of the fact, like, I feel like one of the most cosmic concepts, and this is why Cosmic Country is such a weird thing to me because I keep understanding what it means. But I think part of something that is very cosmic is almost letting go and letting the results take care of itself, as Trey Anastasio talks about quite often.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think it's, getting out of the way of yourself. I know that's another concept Trey has talked about before. But yeah, not overthinking things. Just sometimes a C and a G is just as good as a A7 diminished whatever, like the songs on the early, the early Grateful Dead albums, there's this very garage rock quality to some of them.
Do you think that's why they played New York so many times in the early 70s? Because they had that chromosome there?
I think that let's get to that. It's a more complicated answer. But just how complicated early Grateful Dead songs were. Like songs like Cosmic Charlie, are kind of like, sort of this easy loping blues song. And then there's not one, but two different bridges with like completely different sets of chord changes and like this kind of leaping vocal part. My friends and I tried to learn how to play You Don't Have to Ask. And
okay,
which is like a really early Dead tune. And it's really complicated. It sounds like a garage rock song that's got like 4 chords, but like each verse is different. The vocal arrangement is different on each. Phil. There's like 2 key changes in the guitar solo. It's like kind of this like weird garage rock that's sort of like the thing that it struck me is like a lot of it is it's like pre-Beach. Well, it's not pre-Beach Boys, but it's pre-Good Vibrations Beach Boys, and it's but just the earliest Dead, they had this ambition to basically write complex music that was going to bring pop music or their conception of rock or whatever to kind of this next level. And when we hear it now, and it just kind of sounds like psychedelic rock, garage rock, but there's ambition in there, and there's some of it's and what Brian Wilson ended up doing is these songs like Good Vibrations with all these songs with through composed in different sections or whatever, and the Dead were kind of almost at the edge of that, and then just like veered in a different direction, which is way in a different direction,
and they hit it on the head.
Though songs did get complicated again because the arc is
Box of Rain is weird.
So Phil Lesh was kind of the main instigator probably of the weird chord changes. Box of Rain is weird, but then you progress past this period of kind of American stuff.
Gets weird again.
It gets weird again into like Blues for Allah, which is so obviously weird. Is pretty far from American aesthetic theme as you can get, at least title wise. Well, I guess blues, but anyway. So yeah, there's this very complicated part of early Dead, and you still get whiffs of that on Working Man's Dead. Like there's strange changes in Cumberland blues that are not
very heavy metal.
Yeah, that weird like descending thing. There's things, there are parts of them that are not out of traditional music and not out of folk music. And that's
even
the part.
Cosmic fact about Cumberland blues is that's one of the more country-ass songs on that record, and that's written about a Cumberland mine, right? In what I think it's Sweden, Spring Hill, Sweden.
Nova Scotia. There's the Nova Scotia is the one that I was referencing, I think. But
I think it's in a town called Spring Hill.
Yeah, the Spring Hill mine disaster,
which is but that's the town I'm from in Tennessee.
Oh, really? Is that where? But I thought the Spring Hill mine disaster. I thought was in Nova Scotia. I'm not totally. I can't remember the details.
I'm just saying, when I
can't remember the details of all these mine disasters.
Right.
I wish I was a better labor historian.
Detail to remember in just
there's.
Day, but it's like
labor history is pretty grisly.
It's like the fact that growing up in Spring Hill, Tennessee, which is just like so crazy, and that's where Saturn cars are made, which is like the most cosmic car brand. I just don't even know what to make of all these like weird simulation life signs. And when you mentioned that it was from the Nova Scotia mines, I think correctly so on the podcast, the Grateful Deadcast, I went and looked it up, and it's Spring Hill is the name of the city. And it's like, that is the only city in Tennessee where I really ever lived aside from Nashville. Very, very strange. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, Forgot where I was.
It's
going
weird
with
to
that.
see how they really hit their stride there for those two records in terms of putting out music that really like would come to really be the genesis of what they would do at a large scale hit wise for the remainder of their career. Because even the simple other songs like Scarlet and Fire, Deal, those songs are relatively like trickle down economics from the success of Working Man and American's Dead. Granted, they're not Slipknot, they're not Shakedown Street, right? There's other branches on the great tree of life that is Grateful Dead, but there's this kind of timeless American classic legacy that can be included in a lot of their songsmithing. And it seems like the genesis of all that started within those two records, and they were like on that vibration, and then they got off right after.
Yeah, though the getting off of it is a lot blurrier than if you just look at the discography of Grateful Dead studio records.
Right.
It's Working Man's Dead, American Beauty, and then in 1973 you get to in 1973 and 74 you get to Wake of the Flood and From the Mars Hotel, which are not this, but there's this whole lineage that's sort of like not Grateful Dead studio records where these songs kind of continue. The next record the next real record that gets made out of Garcia Hunter songs is Jerry's solo debut in 1971, which has Sugaree and Birdsong and Deal. And to me is actually kind of like, it's just Jerry and Bill Kreutzmann in the studio together. And to me, that's kind of like a cornerstone Dead album. I've actually started some people on that record. It's a great mix of just straight ahead songwriting and bizarro studio experimentation, a lot with Jerry on piano. And then you get Bob Weir's Ace, which is another record that's got kind of moves in this direction. It's got some tunes with Robert Hunter, but John Perry Barlow wasn't, his stuff is Americana-y, but the Weir Barlow pairing not quite as timeless as the Garcia Hunter pairing. I think they'd be the first to admit that.
Yeah.
But then you get Europe 72, which is kind of like, that's almost like the peak of this songwriting,
right?
In terms of all these themes of just kind of pulling from traditional American music and kind of creating something that sounds like, Jerry said this somewhere. He's like, we were trying to go for something that you can kind of imagine hearing in a jukebox somewhere, like in some, I think he said that about Tennessee Jet. You can kind of imagine walking into a bar and hearing that playing in the background. And they move away from that with songs like Eyes of the World and what they get into in 73. But Robert Hunter really considered the Europe 72 stuff to be the follow-up to American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. And there's actually, he talks about in the later 70s in an interview, he talks about like, I'm writing to the record company. I really think they should put out a 1-disc version of Europe 72 that only has the new songs on it, the songs that were new at the time. Like, he considered there to be a single album worth of new material within the 3 discs of Europe 72 that he thinks should be highlighted as its own individual album.
So he's saying Europe 72 sans 12-minute trucking, etc.
Yeah, basically. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sans that side, or sans that disc. Sans the 3rd disc. And
that's the weird side.
Take away. Yeah. But yeah, but then the period kind of goes in and out, because I feel like Jerry kind of tapped into it again a little bit with Lazy River Road, which is obviously much later on. It wasn't like he totally, went away from this style of songwriting. It was just that he found other ones.
It's weird because you see it in of course, another blue chip monolith artist that, of course, had great collaboration with the Dead is Bob Dylan. Mm-hmm. And the chart of Bob Dylan, especially for everyone who's not watching, is very much up, down, up, down. It's like a flailing S&P 500. It's just like, it's very scary in terms of the success and in terms of almost just the musicality too of what he was going for. We see Bob in Weird Christian era, which yielded some cool results. And then we see, my favorite era of the post motorcycle accident, Nashville Skyline. But you have like these almost like episodes of time in these characters' lives, being Robert Hunter, being Jerry, being Bob Dylan, and all these great writers, where they're almost like accompanied by a muse that doesn't quite seem to be an earthly thing. And listening to a lot of recent Bob Weir speaking, and reaching out to people who are presently working with Bob as he works on some weird secret project here in Nashville. Bob has this one concept that he keeps bringing up, which is like song ideas are not, they're other life forms that are trying to speak through us. And I feel like whatever characters we're speaking through, those characters that we're talking about now being Jerry and Bob and everyone in the Dead and Bob Dylan, et cetera, they had this weird period of time where they were like really accompanied by these characters. And then somewhere along the way, the characters like might have gone away or they weren't as pungent. And not to say that those songs aren't as good, but there's certainly like a different phenomenology. There's a different level of fireworks to Friend of the Devil than there is like feel like a stranger or something like that, right? Althea all day long, not fade away all day long, but there's a different resonance there. And I think the pinnacle of that can really be explained when Robert Hunter in the same day wrote Ripple. Well, what was it? Ripple broke down Palace into Lay Me Down.
Yeah, that's just insane to me. That I can't believe that. Yeah, I mean, just in one burst. Like his first day in London. Talk about a muse moment of just having everything aligned. And I think that one moment is probably pretty symbolic of that whole period for them, where they just kept like cranking out tunes, just one after another, just all kind of touched with the same inspiration, the same, cut from the same cloth in that way. And it's interesting to see that evolve, because it's not like it's not like they one day turned off that spigot and turned on another one. It kind of like sort of flows into each other. There are songs, that are kind of have a little bit of both in them, both sides. This idea of following the muse and sort of tapping in and out of it is interesting. Though, obviously that's up for debate in some places about when the muse is on and off. And I'm also a huge Dylan dork and been spending a lot of time actually trying to make sense of his 80s stuff, which is, full of thorns.
Full of thorns. That's great. That's not the Daniel Lanois era, right?
No, it's a little bit later. It starts in the 80s. You meet Lanois. That stuff starts in like 89, I think. Oh Mercy and Under the Red Sky and that stuff, which is amazing. No, I'm in kind of like the dark years, but there's still this great, interesting, fascinating stuff even among, the dregs of the 80s. There's always the muse is always there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, circling back to the concept of cosmic country, what do you think it was about specifically the song "Friend of the Devil" that made you say that, as opposed to the other country-esque songs that can be found within that birthing period of Working Man's Dead and American Beauty? Like specifically, like Direwolf is pretty cosmic.
Yeah, for sure. And I may have said something equivalent during that episode.
I think so.
I'm sure I call that, but I guess the thing that made me say cosmic country specifically with Friend of the Devil is just that it's built on that super simple descending bass part.
It's the major scale, which we're talking about opera. It's like literally G descending all the way down to the lower G, and it's like. So you're going to tell me music has hundreds of years to evolve, but yet we're going to use the same 7 notes?
In this case, the way that came out songwriting was I'm pretty sure that they were just kind of like screwing around, and somebody was just kind of like, that's a super easy pattern to land on. And I've heard variations of this story with lots of songs, not just Friend of the Devil.
Right.
But like somebody say, oh, that's perfect. Oh man, I'm just tuning up, and it's just like, I'm just playing like, but it's a case of just simple being effective.
And that's country at its essence.
Right. And to me, that's what makes Friend of the Devil such a, almost like it's maybe the most straightforward song in the Dead's repertoire if you actually just want to play it as a guitarist. Maybe Ripple is probably a little more straightforward even than Friend of the Devil.
Similar chords too. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But it's somebody. Yeah, it's the same. Like the same tools, the same ingredients. Pardon?
It's like their most covered song too, as well. I think, as you stated in the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think a lot of that is just because it's easy. Truckin' is not an easy song to just like. Can't just play Truckin'. You know, it's a lot of words, couple sections, weird modulation, you know,
right,
it's,
you can't just play it.
But Friend of the Devil, you kind of can. And I think that's why it's become, and, you know, and the cosmic part is just the, you know, the storyline of it, that you're, you know, making a deal with the devil, kind of like, just, it's got a supernatural storyline, and that's, you know, and, you know, and it, but the stakes of it are so, the way that the stakes of it are phrased is so,
wow,
you know, out of Americana and traditional stuff, you know, hid out in the cave up in Reno, all that kind of stuff. But then the deeper story is obviously not on this earth. If you're making a deal with the devil, so right. That's and it's not cosmic the way Dark Star Crashes is cosmic. You know, that's
most cosmic. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's and that's what makes it cosmic country as opposed to just cosmic.
Yeah,
and you know, Dark Star is kind of almost without genre in that way. It's kind of more like a tone poem than a, you know, certainly not a rock song. There's not even really a trap drum kit on it. So,
oh wow, yeah. You know, the Dark Star made the most amount of sense to me when I heard Robert Hunter speak about it in Long Strange Trip and interviewed him. I'm like, oh, I just needed to hear him say it, and now for some reason it makes total sense. But having always heard Jerry sing it along with the band playing it, you do like you don't get to interpret the words in the same way as you would as if they were just on their own and their own lonesome. And they really do just carry over. They have a timeless essence. It's almost like Robert Hunter was literally just a conduit for these timeless ideas.
Well, we didn't really get to talk about this that much in the Working Men's Theater American Beauty seasons, because lyrically those were really very much drawing on folk themes, as we were talking about. But you know, Hunter is also a modernist, and that's very much run on T.S. Eliot. You know, the "Shall We Go, You and I" part is almost straight out of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And so Hunter was a huge scholar of, you know, James Joyce and modernist poetry and science fiction and fantasy novels. So it's, you know, again, that's the cosmic part. That's kind of this like, yeah, that's sort of the same way they're kind of like putting all these other Americana influences into the blender. They're also putting these modernist poetry influences into the blender. And, you know, in the case of Uncle John's band, you know, Eastern European folk music, it's really just pulling from whatever seems appropriate at the moment.
Right. The act of first principles is, you take an idea that it's its most distilled concept and then bringing it into an arena where that idea might not presently make a lot of sense. And what was it? Those Scandinavian, Norwegian folk female group that Jerry was listening to for the intro of Uncle John's band.
Oh yeah. The Bulgarian.
Bulgarian?
Yeah.
So
right. No, there's such a, right. But, you know, and it's, on the one hand, yeah, totally out there, but it's like you do see so Pete Seeger, there's a video of them performing that song on Pete Seeger's amazing 60s show called Rainbow Quest, which was kind of like a proto PBS show. I think it might have, I don't remember what stations it actually aired on, but, you know, there's a Pete Seeger having an incredible array of musicians into the studio to perform this stuff. And it's a reminder that the folk revival, in the sense of the folk revival that started in kind of the 40s and 50s and 60s, that were sort of led by Alan Lomax and Pete Seeger, kind of to rediscover this old music, wasn't just old American music. It was really trying to crack into, I'm positive Pete Seeger wouldn't use the word cosmic American music or cosmic any music, but for him, it's sort of about trying to tap into this global spirit of music making. It's like, I don't know, I'm going to get the computer methods wrong, but it's like the deepest level of code. It's like the binary part of computer, the zeros and ones, I suppose.
Right.
And the soul, you know, and the way that you can find that anywhere and you can experience it anywhere from anywhere. Anyway.
Right. Charlie and Bill Monroe, you know, you hear Charlie's version of Rosalie McFall and it's like, Charlie Monroe, you know, you're thinking, oh my God, like where's all this coming from? It's like, well, no, clearly from Europe and Eastern Europe are these melodies coming from. And only when it got here to America did the instrumentation and that form of a time signature that was combined with blues and those kinds of scales allow for that phrasing and that thing to manifest, which creates an American sound, which the Dead are kind of like the most American thing that's ever been created at that large of a scale.
I mean, it's like they were kind of picking up on the next theme of that. So like a song like Peggy-O or these things that were like child ballads would kind of come over from, the Highlands or wherever and get picked up in the Appalachians and updated and changed and turned into kind of these American versions. And the Dead are kind of just the next link in that chain. They're the ones who are picking up on those themes and evolving them into the, they're not the only ones. There's lots, that's what the folk revival was lots of people kind of like picking them up, but the Dead modernized them. That's what that was why the rock and roll part of it was so revolutionary. Like, putting a beat behind Cold Rain in the Snow and, carrying that into the, that's the thing that kind of like pushes it forward,
if you listen to
making it so that people, pardon?
You listen to Aubrey Ramsey's version on the banjo, and you're like, this is a way different interpretation, both rhythmically and melodically, than what the Dead are doing. Yeah.
Oh, it's just pure haunt, that one. Yeah. It's just, oh my gosh, that's one of my all-time favorite recordings of anybody doing anything on any instrument on any record. But then somehow you get to the Dead playing that in an arena and people are dancing to it, and it's but somehow that sort of that weird mountain spirit is still somehow in there. And even if it's not overt, and even if it sounds, if you played the Dead's recording for somebody, for Aubrey Ramsey, he'd be like, what the hell is this? They probably wouldn't hear that thread. But the fact that we're talking about it and that it's like, it pulled us in, or pulled me in anyway, for sure. Like growing up on American pop music and American rock music, and then hearing those things come out through Dead songs, it's like you can hear that. You can hear that there's something. Oh yeah, more. You can hear there's something ancient in there.
That's the thing. Yeah, ancient, very old,
or timeless, or you're hearing through to something beyond them, and that's such a powerful thing. And it's it's not only the Dead that did that. Lots of but the Dead did that.
The Dead did that
really well. Really well.
They did the best job at kind of transporting you to that plane, and you hear about it too, going into Dark Star and then coming into or doing Morning Dew and then bringing it back to Stella Blue. Or it's like coming in from space and then going into Stella Blue rather. And it's like they do this thing where they really kind of like Virgin Airlines, like they understand that they're taking you to somewhere and they are bringing you right back down to this dark and dismal side of Venerio that you weren't quite aware of. You're like, in the dark.
The black and bloody mire.
Yeah.
The
Direwolf runs.
Yeah. But no, for sure. I mean, the Dead talked about how their shows had a narrative to them.
Yeah.
And, a distinct narrative or an intent in. There's an intentionality, even if it's not articulated.
And even if they didn't write all the songs too, that's another thing people get like too big of a fucking ego about, where they have to be like, you have to write all these songs. And it's like, that is not true at all. It's the story that you tell with the songs, as you were saying about the narrative of a show.
Yeah, for sure. No, I guess as my tastes go, I kind of wish parts of the Dead show had leaned a little bit less on certain cover songs. I'm.
Is it the Bobby songs or the Jazz covers?
Yeah, it's weird. I love a lot of what that man brings to the Grateful Dead's music and just music in general. I'm not a straight up Bobby hater by any means, but there's a lot of times where I feel like I don't need another version of Around and Around wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I'll take One More Saturday Night over Around and Around any day.
Right. Yeah. But that's nitpicking, isn't it? They knew what they were doing, and that's there's a quote from Mickey where he said, we're in the transportation business. Like they were conscious of that for sure.
We're in the transportation business. That is great. I feel like Bobby was the most transparent in his self-discovery. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was definitely the one that was trying to figure out songwriting the most. And, with Sugar Magnolia too, even though you mentioned very eloquently on that episode of the Grateful Dead cast, where that was essentially one of Bobby's first keeper songs.
Yeah. Well, so that's a fascinating concept. I don't know him that well. I don't really know him. I've interviewed him a couple of times. I'm fascinated by the way he would write songs and then abandon them. Because there are songs that he wrote that to my ear should have stuck around in dead set list. And I know, I'm sure he had musical issues with them.
Sure.
Like Black Throated Wind, for example, is one that disappeared it's such a wonderful song, and it disappeared for such a long time. Weather Reports, the prelude to the Weather Report suite is one of my favorite things, maybe my favorite piece of Weir's music, and that disappeared, after 1974, and the Dead never played that again. Rat Dog, I think, probably, I'm sure he's played it since then. And I guess I was always, listening to Dead sets. It was like, Big River is the wrong example, because I always love when the Grateful Dead play Big River.
Me too.
But, I'd rather hear Black Throated Wind than like Me and My Uncle, like in the
their most played song too.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah. And I guess to me, it's like, Black Throated Wind feels like this real artistic expression of something that's original, and like I do see that argument there, and I guess I just don't. I don't know. We're getting into like the real finer grain of Grateful Dead set listing here. It's just a personal preference, really. And probably in a stadium or in an arena, I'm probably, if you asked Bob, Me and My Uncle and Big River and Mama Tried and all these country songs they kept playing, which are amazing songs, and this is not at all a comment on the quality of the songwriting, but those probably get people dancing more than Weather Report Suite Prelude.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Man,
he could have done that instead of Looks Like Rain a few times. Anyway.
See, Looks Like Rain is a fascinating trick, because you might think, if you're not a person who's very musically inclined, you might think When I Paint My Masterpiece is about to come in.
Right. Well, depends which era of Looks Like Rain we're talking. Yes, totally.
Right. Yeah. I'm talking more that 90s. I'm talking.
Yeah, for sure. I love those, the super early versions of Look Like Rain with Jerry on pedal steel and Phil doing that like high harmony. Or I really like that arrangement. I gotta go.
Okay. Hey, Jesse, thank you for the time, my friend. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Daniel. I've definitely given me like a lot more to think about in terms of the arc of cosmic country music and how it all fits together, both the cosmic and the country.
Damn,
I'm sure other countries have cosmic country music too.
We'll find out. Yeah. Thank you, my friend. All right. I look forward to the book and everything that you write. Thank you so much, man. Just ask y'all, if there's someone that you admire, and if they are accessible, reach out to them and ask if you can pick their brain. I learned a dozen things from speaking with the one and only Jesse Jarnow. I cannot thank him enough for his time. Thank you guys for listening. I learned more about cosmic country and what that is, and I'm learning more about that every day. I discovered more of my passion for the Grateful Dead, and I was reminded of the fact that we are boundaryless as listeners and as humans. And if you want to see things that way, it helps a lot. Thank you, Jesse, for reminding me that. So, if you want to support the podcast, that would just be such a fantastic and cosmic thing for you guys to do. Please do so on Patreon, patreon.com/Daniel Donato. Follow us on Spotify, review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to us on YouTube. All of it's Daniel Donato. The most important thing, though, is to join the Cosmic Country Club. That is the most exclusive club that there is for all things Cosmic Country. And we have a new album coming out soon, of which is the best that we've ever done. And everyone in the Cosmic Country Club is going to hear it first, and it's going to be a very fun time. We're going to do a listening party all together, and it's going to be a good thing. So that's free. All those things are free. But what's also free is gratitude. That's important. Stay patient, stay persistent, and stay positive. And I'll see y'all down the Lost Highway.